There are only a few shows that my husband and I can watch together. And when we're watching a show, I know that there's a thing that can happen that is guaranteed to make him super irritated. It's when they open on the hero of the show, the main character, and he or she is in grave peril, maybe covered in blood or in a hospital bed or running from something down a hall, and you don't know how they got there. So you get drawn into the story, and then all of a sudden there's a black screen and it says 24 hours earlier. My husband will go, "They can't do this to me again. I hate it." He hates flashbacks. I've talked to a few of you that hate them too. He hates that when they do that to a story, and they use it all the time. In all kinds of shows and movies and everything else, they show you the action part, the scene that everything is going to center around, and then that black screen 7 days earlier. So that the whole time you're trying to figure out what happened to lead them to whatever event that it might be. And my husband throws stuff at the screen. He's been known to walk away. It really, really irritates him. So we were talking about this yesterday because one of the shows that we like to watch together, The Walking Dead zombie show, they did this. And he was super betrayed because they did this scene. They opened on the hero and he's covered in blood and he's sitting there and he's shaking. And you don't know how he got there. And so we're drawn in, and then all of a sudden they do the black screen and they flash back. And so he said, "No, not this show that I love. They can't do this to me." Now, I love a good flashback. So we were having a discussion about this, flashbacks, and what they're like and what they do for the show. And it's his argument that he thinks flashbacks are lazy, that they're a way to draw you in when the story is not that good. He says, just tell me the story and get it over with. So I think some people, right, think this is a good way to do it. Just tell me the story, front to back and get it over with. I love a good flashback. And I was arguing that since I was a journalism major and I minored in English, I'm a little bit of an expert on the subject, and said a flashback is completely a legitimate literary device. They were used as far back as the Odyssey by Homer, told in flashback. I even mentioned to my husband that 2 of his favorite movies involve a flashback. They start at the very beginning with what everything centers around. One of them is Citizen Kane. It starts with a flashback, right? Where the man says Rosebud, and the whole time you're trying to figure out why. And the other movie of his that's a favorite is The Usual Suspects. They open on this man who says, "You," and you spend the whole movie trying to figure out who it is. Everything centers around the ending. It doesn't spoil it, it makes it better. Because you try to figure out what's going to happen when it goes to that flashback, right? The Gospel of John is told in flashback. I think this is great. It was one of my arguments. It's in the Bible, so it has to be something that's really useful, right? He eventually said, "Well, I only don't like flashbacks when they're not used well." I said, all right, okay. I'll allow that. In the Bible, the Gospel of John is told as a flashback. So picture this. It opens on the scene of our gospel for today. It opens as Jesus is taking the cross on his shoulders, our hero of the story. He's taking a cross on his shoulders. And in John, he carries his own cross. Nobody carries it for him. And he walks up the hill by himself. He's already been beaten and is probably looking pretty terrible. He walks up the hill by himself, carrying the cross, and is crucified by the Roman soldiers. And when we see him there, everything hinges on the cross. Everything. And when the story is told, I think this is the moment that it flashes back from. When he's crucified, there's a sign above his head that says, "The King of the Jews." And it says it in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek so that nobody can mistake it. The King of the Jews. And when somebody questions it, when the chief priest questions it, Pilate says famously, "What I have written, I have written." So that's our opening scene. If I were directing the movie, I would open it on the scene of the cross, because the cross is our faith. It's the thing everything centers around. But then when you flash back to Palm Sunday, you see, after you've seen this king hanging on a cross, you flash back to him being treated like a king. Maybe there might be a black screen and it would say 6 months earlier at the Festival of the Booths. Jesus rode down on a donkey like a king would do, like it says in the Old Testament the Messiah would do, rode down into Jerusalem. People were throwing palm branches everywhere, and you have in your mind still the crucifixion. How did he get there? From the palms being thrown and being treated like an actual king. Everything hinges around the cross, though. It's my argument that the story is not ruined because we know the ending. We all know the ending to this story. We all know that the cross is where Jesus goes. So when we flash back to Palm Sunday and the crowds yelling, the cross is what enlightens it for us. When you think about the crowd on Palm Sunday, we are the crowd for a little while. We are that crowd because in the crowd, they start talking about all the wonderful things that Jesus has done. They say he's done these miracles. They talk about he raised Lazarus, and that's why the crowd was following him. He had done miracle after miracle. He turned the water into wine. He made a blind man see. He talked to a woman at the well and told her everything she had ever done. He had done all of these things. At that point, for the crowd, for us, it's really easy to follow Jesus, right? It's easy to say, come follow this guy because he does really amazing things. He's really a great teacher. But you can't make that argument in light of the cross. I saw an interview with Bono, the lead singer of U2, and he was really questioned about his faith. Finally, I have never heard him speak publicly about it, not in this way. Somebody said, "Who is Jesus to you?" And he said, "Well, Jesus is God." And he goes on to say, in the Gospels, Jesus calls himself the Son of God. And so he says, to me, Jesus was either the Son of God or he was crazy. There is no in-between when you look at the cross. And so if everything centers around the cross, we can't be that crowd anymore who just says he's a good teacher, who says he does these miracles for us. We have to be the people that see everything in light of the cross. It has to be our first scene and our final scene and the one that we come back to again and again and again. It's who we are. All of us probably have moments that we flash back on, right, throughout our lives. They might be really good moments. They might be the worst moments of your life, but we think back on them, don't we? There are moments that everything hinges on in your life too. That was another one of my arguments, that life is lived in flashbacks sometimes. We have those moments that we think about all the time. All of those moments are in light of the cross. In seminary, when we started to talk about, all of those things that the crowd talks about, like, well, Jesus did this and Jesus did that, and what did he really say here, and what did he do here, and how do we believe in this miracle? This one professor would say, remember, it's about the cross. Remember to come back to the cross. All those moments in our lives that we flash back on, all those moments that we wish we could forget, but that our lives hinge on, that we see everything in light of. If Jesus is not crazy, if Jesus is the Son of God, then he takes all of those cross moments, which is what we used to call them, cross moments in our lives, onto himself when he's on the cross. All of those moments in our lives that we wish that we could forget, when things were the worst that they could ever have been, and all the joyful moments, it all hinges on Jesus on the cross. Everything that's ever happened to us, Jesus has taken that on. If, as Bono says, if Jesus is the Son of God, then that means that we have a God who literally felt our pain, We have a God who takes all of those moments in our lives and transforms them on the cross, because God has been there too. God takes all of those flashback moments and those moments that our lives hinge upon, and those moments in his own life when he was treated like a king, and takes them to the cross. The cross is the center for us. The cross is what everything hinges upon. And the cross is where we see Jesus taking on all of our pain as God looked at us and still loved us. Amen.